Okay, welcome to the video. Sig Guy here. In this video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to use the new 365 Easy Sear Spring Service Kit to reset your Sear Spring in your 365 so you can finish the assembly of your 365. Let's get started. So let's first start out by what is the kit? Why might I need the kit? And damn you, Sig Guy, why is there another kit on the website that I have to buy? When I first started doing the 365 videos a long time ago, I was actually hesitant to remove the Sear and the Sear Spring just because those two items for me were difficult to put back together. So I can imagine that other people probably feel the same way. And I kind of laugh about it now because it's so easy to do. But I certainly can relate to the people that maybe share that same opinion of it being difficult. So all these things have round counts on them. All these springs, especially from the manufacturer, to where they need to be replaced to keep that firearm operational at its intended level. So whether you want to go to a gunsmith and pay him to do it or do it yourself, which I highly encourage, I would rather provide people with the information, the knowledge, and the tools to actually do it. That way they can do it themselves and basically spend very little to get it done. So having said all that, one of the most difficult parts of reassembling your FCU, like I mentioned, was getting your safety lever pivot pin in past your Sear spring. Okay. So your Sear spring is right here in this hole. Okay. That's the leg of the Sear spring. This is what your Sear spring looks like somewhere when it's out of the pistol. Okay. So we have this little leg here, which is the leg. This is the OEM one. This is my newer one in the hole, and I'll go over that in a second. This leg here is what we see in the hole, okay? And because it's blocking the hole, we can't get a pin through that hole. So we got to move that spring up. And when we do that, there's a little shelf or a notch above this hole on the inside of the FCU. So when we move that spring up high enough, and because that spring's on a little bit of an angle, it'll actually transfer over onto that shelf once it's up high enough. That way, when we pull our tool out that we move the spring up with, now there's a vacant hole there. There is no spring or wire in that hole, and we can easily reinstall our safety lever pivot pin. So that's the whole process of all this stuff. So years ago, I came out with the 365 disassembly and reassembly kit, and it has this punch in there, which this taper right here is the exact dimensions that need to be to move that spring up and to reset it. So we typically would push this in there like that, give it a little twist. You'd hear a click. You'd pull out the punch, and then you'd look through the hole, and there would be no spring there. This is a brand new, newest production FCU right out of my fuse, okay? And unfortunately, this punch will not reset the spring. So that happens every now and then. This isn't guaranteed on every single FCU out there. I've rarely had anybody contact me saying it didn't reset it, but just knowing that it's possible that it doesn't reset it, I wanted to come up with an alternative to guarantee that people can get this taken care of. So I came out with the 365 Sear Spring slave pin a couple weeks back, and they've been on the website for a couple weeks. So the intent of this guy is basically to put underneath our Sear spring, just like so, okay? And now we can kind of push that all the way in there. And now we have a slave pin that's holding that spring where it needs to be, so we can push our safety lever in that hole, pushing the slave pin out, and then that'll be the easiest way to install this safety lever pivot pin. Okay. So that's the reason for the kit. That's why I made the kit, and that's why I made the slave pin. And then when I was doing a video the other day to show people how to use this, I noticed that it's difficult to push our safety lever pivot pin in there. Okay, many different reasons. One, there's these notches in it. Okay, that the spring rides along this pin and it gets down into those notches, which those are there to hold the spring. This actually, the spring holds the pin from falling out. Anyway, so trying to get by those pins or the spring in the notches, pushing out our safety or our slave pin, plus just the friction of the hole and everything. It's difficult to push this in there. So I can only imagine people with not great grip strength, or even the females with the fingernails. I can see that this is probably almost impossible to get that done. So basically, I came up with this key here. Okay, so this is the whole reason for this video now. So this key is designed basically to hold, my safety lever pivot pin, so I can now use this to push that slave pin out, easily insert this. I'm not breaking a fingernail, I'm not hurting my fingers, and it's easy to do. So that's why I came up with the key here. And then included in this kit is going to be a new redesigned Sear spring. Like I said, this is the OEM spring. The spring in here has a longer leg, and I'll show you that here in a second. So that's why I came up with the kit. That's the purpose of the kit, and that's the thing that's going to make this very easy to reassemble our 365. So let me get the Sear spring out of here so I can show you the comparison between the two, and then we'll show you just how easy it is reassembling this using the kit. All right, so OEM spring versus the new improved spring. We'll put these on my hand in the orientation that they're in the FCU. So you can see the leg here on the new improved one's a lot longer than the OEM spring. Okay, so there's not really a problem with the OEM spring, but it's much easier to reassemble using the longer leg spring, because when we're putting our pin in the hole, you can barely see the end of the OEM spring. So although you start underneath the spring, because it's so short, like 9 times out of 10, you end up above the spring, and that's not the proper orientation for that slave pin and the safety lever pivot pin to go into that hole. That pin has got to be underneath the spring. Okay. Oops. It's got to be underneath the spring. And with the spring on the new improved one being so long, it almost stretches across the whole width of the hole in the FCU. Okay. So once you get it started underneath the spring, it's almost impossible for it to get above the spring, which is the improper position. So that's the difference between the springs, and it's the exact same spring weight. It's not a plus 10 or a plus 20 or a minus 10, minus 20. It's the OEM equivalent, okay? And there's no difference between that one and the OEM one other than the length of the leg, which makes it easier to reassemble, okay? So let me get the Sear spring back into the FCU with the Sear and the pin, and then we'll continue on showing you how to use the kit. So to use the kit, as you can see, our new improved Sear spring leg is in the hole there. Even before we put any of this stuff together, when we get our toolkit, our key has a hole in the top here. That hole is used to help make it easier to push our Sear spring, or excuse me, our slave pin into the hole. So you want to make sure that you put this pin in there, take it in and out, in and out, in and out, and it goes in pretty deep. So make sure that you push it in far enough. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because it's usually a pretty snug fit. And then when we push this in the hole, when we go to pull the key out, it pulls the pin with it. Okay. So just kind of keep exercising that over and over. Make sure that's relatively not a tight fit, but we want a loose fit. The notch in the bottom there, that is basically the same shape as our pivot pin. You can see it's got a step in it. Well, there's a step inside there too. So you want to make sure that that goes in there and it's nice and straight up and down. If you're crooked, there might be a little piece of support material left in there. Just take your slave pin and pick that out of there. I try to make sure they're all perfectly clean, but obviously I'm human and humans suck sometimes and they make mistakes. So if that doesn't fit in there nice and straight like that, just kind of look in that hole. There's probably a little piece of support material. Anyway, I make things snug so that way this thing will hold my pivot pin without falling out. but we don't want it so snug to where we put this in there, we go to pull this out again and it pulls our pin out with it. So just kind of make sure that that's a good fit before we get into the assembly process using the key, okay? So I'm going to take my key, I'm going to put my slave pin like that, and then I'm going to get my slave pin underneath my Sear spring, just like that, and we're going to push it in the hole. We don't need to go in all the way yet. We want to make sure that we are underneath the spring, because if you got the OEM spring, like I said, it's going to be 4 out of 5 times you're going to end up above the spring. So we want to make sure that everything's proper before we put this pin in, because everything will go together with that spring above, underneath the slave pin and underneath this pin. We'll put it all back together and your firearm won't work. And it's all because the spring's it's not above it, it's below it. So after we put that in there, a little bit, you don't even have to go in that far. What we're going to do is we're going to just push on our Sear and see if there's spring tension there. You can see how that's rebounding. Okay. That means that my spring is sitting on top of my slave pin. Okay. And it's pushing my Sear up. So if I took this out and I put it above the spring, which is the improper location, and then my new improved spring, it won't even go all the way in. With the OEM spring, you could put this all the way in and you wouldn't even notice it's in the wrong orientation. But for demonstration purposes, I got it above the spring. So now when I go to push on my Sear, it doesn't move. It's basically bottomed out. Okay? Because what's happening is that Sear spring, the leg is being pulled down, which is pulling down on my Sear spring, which is hooked to the Sear, and it's pulling down on the Sear. So everything's being jammed down, okay, which is incorrect. This needs to be underneath our Sear spring leg there. We have spring tension here, so we know we're good to go. We can basically push that in all the way. We can use the edge of it, to keep pushing that in. So we're basically flush with the side of our FCU. So what I would do next is I would take the cap that came with your slave pin and just kind of put it over there. That way, as we're running this thing out, we're not going to stab ourselves in the hand by accident. So we can take our safety lever pivot pin. We can put it in our key just like that. Make sure we're all lined up nice and straight. And then we can just use that to push our slave pin out. And it helps to rotate. It helps to rotate the key as you're pushing it in, because those notches in it are trying to get by the Sear spring, the leg of it. So we'll take that key off just like that. And as you can see, our safety lever pivot pin is about halfway put in, maybe a little bit more. We don't want it to go all the way in yet, because we still need to install our safety lever in this side over here. So now that all we have left is to finish the reassembly, and the most important thing, which I always forget, is my takedown safety. So make sure your takedown safety is put in before we slide this pin all the way back in. Because what happens, usually I'll go to grab my trigger bar spring in the very end, and my takedown safety is sitting right next to it. So make sure all these are in there. Takedown lever, your slide catch didn't fall off, your takedown safety. And then we'll just hold that with our finger as we rotate it this way. We'll take our safety lever, which goes in that way. We'll slide it right down into the slot there, watching the hole in the safety lever as it goes by the holes in the FCU. Then we'll line up that hole there. We can actually use our slave pin to put right in that hole and hold our safety lever. So we're pivoting on the slave pin. Now, when we push our safety lever pivot pin in, we're going to twist it and push it in. And mine slid all the way in pretty easy that time. It doesn't always go in that easy. Okay. So a lot of times it helps if you push on your Sear. Push your Sear in and out as you're pushing that pin in, rotating it and pushing it in at the same time. It seems to go in pretty easily. Also, if you have it in like right now and you start pushing in on your Sear, sometimes it makes the fit so loose around the pin that it actually falls out. And you got to kind of start the process all over. So make sure at the end, when we're all reassembled after the trigger bar and we're doing a function check, kind of like, make sure your pin doesn't, make sure you're holding it up like this, rather than upside down so that pin doesn't fall out. Okay. So now that we have all that together, we can put our disconnector in. Slide that in just like that. Put our trigger bar in place. Flip upside down. And this is a plus 10 tactile reset Sig Guy trigger bar spring. They're available on the website. So it's just a plus 10. Gets rid of that mushy reset feel in the 365. Got them for the 320 as well. So just make sure that your trigger bar is in the hole through the trigger bar. The trigger bar spring's in the hole through the trigger bar. And then it is wrapped around your FCU right here. Sometimes this doesn't like to sit in the right place. It likes to be up behind there. Just make sure you get that in the right place. And this is what I was talking about as we're doing this to make sure everything works. Sometimes if you have this on its side, that safety lever pivot pin will fall out. So just make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. So there you have it. That's all reassembled, all put back together. Put our receiver pin in. Slide catch down. Install our slide. So you can hear that reset. It's more tactile, more click, more positive because of that plus 10 spring in there. So there you go. That's how you use the new kit. And that's just how easy it is to reset that Sear spring. So there you have it. That is how to use the Easy Sear Spring Service Kit, 365 Easy Sear Spring Service Kit. I'm going to be offering it 2 ways temporarily. It's going to come in the 365 Dart Kit, which already comes with the 1 punch, the 90-degree pick, and a pin alignment tool. It's going to also come with the key, the Sear Spring slave pin, and we're going to put a Sear spring in there. I don't know if I'm going to bundle this in the kit or not. I don't know what I'm going to do about that yet. I got a couple days here to decide while I'm waiting on my packaging. So, and then it's going to come just like this with the key, the slave pin, and the spring in the kit. I'm going to offer it this way for those people that already bought the kit. They can just buy this and add it to their kit, so they don't have to buy a whole new kit again. But after a little while, it's just going to be available in the 365 kit. Okay, so as mentioned also, I really like to provide the tools and stuff for people to do this stuff themselves. So if you haven't been on the website, under the tools tab, which is the second tab up here on the left there, we have the new kit. We have the slave pin. You can buy the slave pin just by itself right now currently. We have the takedown lever assist tool for those people that have a hard time rotating their takedown levers. We got 2 tools here. This one will remove the back plate on your 365, so you can get the striker out. And then this one here will, like in the picture there, you use it to collapse the spring on the striker. It holds the spring collapse while you remove the cups to change out that striker spring. The reason why we came up with that is because a lot of people are having light strikes on the 365 and the 320, so we came out with the plus 20 striker spring, which gives that striker a lot more momentum, hits that primer a lot harder, and eliminates a lot of those light strikes. So people are having a hard time getting the strikers out, getting the cups off, so basically we come out with that stuff there to help make that change easy for the person if they want to do it themselves. We got a manual safety kit here for the 320 that helps you remove and reassemble or even delete the manual safety on the 320. We got our multi-function tool, what helps if you want to make your non-manual safety grip module 365 into a manual safety by cutting a notch in there. That jig helps you locate the notch and cut it. Then we have our battery cover tool for many different optics. We have our half punch, and then we start getting into our regular tool kits that have been around for quite a while. We got a Sear spring screwdriver. So just constantly adding as I think of things, better ideas of way to do things, make it easier for the people that want to do this stuff themselves. That's kind of what I'm all about. So as always, I appreciate everybody for the support, the continued support. There's a subscribe button right down here in the corner. If you could subscribe to the channel, like the channel, and more importantly, I guess, is the notification button, the little bell, I guess. If you hit that, that tells YouTube that you enjoyed this type of content. You're going to get notifications every time I post a new video, but then it also it lets other people know that I posted a video, or shares it with other people that maybe are not subscribed to the channel. So that's pretty important. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching, and have a good day.